absolute value inequality is an inequality that has absolute value symbols. So remember that absolute value is distance. So looking at this situation, if I had absolute value of a number or of an expression is greater than a number, so if the absolute value of x is greater than or equal to 5, okay, on a number line, if the distance is at least 5, these numbers to the right of 5 have a distance that's greater than 5, and these numbers that are less than or equal to negative 5 also have a distance that's greater than or equal to 5. So that's going to be an OR situation. So if you have a greater, it means OR. Similarly, if the distance is less than 5, numbers that are this way to 5 and numbers that are least negative 5 are going to be your solution. So you have to look at the less than or if it's greater than. So less means I'm going to make a nest. Okay, see how x is nested between the negative and the positive? So if it's a less than, I'm going to make a nest. And if it's a more or greater than, I'm going to make an OR problem. So an OR is greater than the positive or less than the negative of that number. So another way to look at it is GOLA, G-O, and then L-A. So if you have a greater than, you make an or if you have a less than, you make an and. So remember, this would be an and situation. So example 1, we're going to solve and graph each. So the first one, the distance is less than 5. So this is a less than. The absolute value is less. So I'm going to nest x between the positive and the negative. So you always want to make sure your symbols are going the same way. So this is a less than, I'm going to make less than, and you need to put the negative symbol over here. So then I'm just going to do a simple graph, negative 5 to 5. I'm not really going to do much for a scale, just for the purposes of time. The second one, absolute value is greater than 6. So I'm going to set up an OR. So I'm going to write x plus 5 is greater than 6, or x plus 5 is less than negative 6. So I'm going to have two inequalities. X is greater than 1, or x is less than negative 11 when I'm solving for x. So this would be 1 greater than 1, and then negative 11. It's going that way. Okay, third one. You want to get the absolute value by itself first. So I'm going to divide both sides by 2. So I have the absolute value of x is greater than or equal to 5. So the absolute value is greater than or equal to 5, so I'm going to make an OR. So I'm going to do x is greater than or equal to 5, or x is, and you're changing both of these symbols. You're changing this to be a less than or equal to, and you're changing the 5 to be a negative 5. So x is greater than or equal to 5, or x is less than or equal to negative 5. Okay. Fourth one. So again, I want to isolate the absolute value. So I'm going to divide by negative 3 because this is being multiplied. So I'm going to divide both sides by negative 3. So I'm going to have x plus 4. Now remember, when you're dividing by a negative or multiplying by a negative with an inequality, you have to change the sense of the inequality. So I need to change that to greater, and then this is going to be 4. So again, I have an absolute value that's greater than, so I'm going to make an OR. So I write x plus 4 is greater than 4, or x plus 4 is less than negative 4. So my two equations are going to be x is greater than 0, or x is less than negative 8. So I'm going to have an open circle at 0 going to the right, in an open circle at -8 going to the left. Okay, next one. I have absolute value, and it's greater again. The absolute value is greater than 16, so I'm going to set up an OR. So 4x is greater than 16, or 4x is less than a -16. So I'm going to solve each of these separately. So divide by 4, x is greater than 4. So open dot at 4 to the right. And then divide by 4. So I'm not dividing by a negative, I'm dividing by a positive. So the direction doesn't change. It's still less than -4. Okay, this one, I have absolute value less than. So I'm going to make a nest. So to make a nest, you take your expression that's inside the absolute value. So in this case, it's x plus 5. And I'm going to nest it between, so make the symbols the same thing as this, a positive 12 and a negative 12. The negative needs to go on the left-hand side. So I'm solving this compound inequality. So I subtract 5. So it's going to be -17 is less than or equal to x is less than or equal to 7. So I'm going to make closed dots at -17, closed dots at 7, and shade in between. Okay, now again, I want to isolate the absolute value, so I need to get rid of this 1. So I have to subtract 1. So it's -x plus 4 less than 1. So this is a less than, so I need to make a nest. So I take whatever is inside the absolute value, I'll write it down here, negative x plus 4, and I nest it between 1 and -1. I use the same symbols as this, and I need to put the negative on the left and the positive on the right. And now I'm going to solve this compound inequality. So I need to subtract 4 from all three parts. So I have -5 is less than -x is less than -3. And then I'm going to divide through by a -1. So when you divide through by a negative, you have to change the direction of the inequality. So it's going to turn into 5 is greater than x is greater than 3. Now the last thing you want to do is when you're writing a compound inequality in AND or a nest form, you want to have your least number go on this side over here. So I'm going to flip-flop the 3 and the 5, so it's 3 and 5. If I flip-flop the 3 and the 5, I need to change the symbols. So my answer is going to be 3 is less than x is less than 5. So I'm going to draw an open circle at 3, open circle at 5, x is in between, so I shade in between. And the last one, I want to isolate the absolute value. So I'm going to divide both sides by 6. So I have 4x plus 8 greater than or equal to 2. So this is a greater than situation. So greater than, I'm going to set up 4x plus 8 greater than or equal to 2, 4x plus 8 less than or equal to -2. So solving for x, I subtract 8. So 4x greater than or equal to -6, x greater than or equal to -6/4, which is -3/2, or -1.5, or subtract 8, 4x is less than or equal to -10, x is less than or equal to -5/2 after I reduce it. Okay, so -5/2, I could write right here, going to the left, a closed dot, and then -3/2, going to the right, a closed dot. If you want to do decimals as well, you can.